Greetings, everybody. We are into week 13 of qualitative research methods. This is April 15th through 19th. And before I get into our topic for this week, I want to hit on a couple of things. As I've went through your article reviews, there are a few things that I just want to clarify when we're talking about doing research that hopefully will help make things a little more clear to you. Some of the things make more sense. So, first of all, and I've seen this problem a few times, we need to understand the difference between the research purpose and then research questions and a hypothesis. The research purpose is just that. Why are you doing this research? What is your purpose for conducting this study? It has nothing to do yet with the research questions or the hypotheses. This is just a problem you've seen. It's something that you've discovered, or something that you want to learn more about, and you've found that there's just a lack of information out there. So why are you wanting to conduct this study? That's the research purpose. Based on that, you come up with your research questions. So after you've done your initial study, you've done your initial research, you're trying to find out as much as you can, that's when you find out what's missing, okay? And that's where you start building your research questions. These are used more in exploratory research when we just really don't know. There's a big gap and we need to find some things out. These are not the same as your interview questions. Your interview questions, so whenever you're going to go out and do a phenomenological study or you're doing a case study and you're going to be interviewing people, that's going to help you answer your research questions. So those research questions, and you're usually going to have 4 or 5 of these, that's the overriding focus of what you're going to be trying to discover as you reach your research purpose. Those are the questions, the broad questions that you want answered. And to get those answers, that's where you do your document analysis. That's where you do your interviews. Okay? Hopefully that makes sense. The hypothesis is more of an educated guess. And you can develop a hypothesis more when you have had some experience in this area, when there has been a lot of research into something similar. So for example, if you were going to do a case study and you were looking at how a university handled I hate to say it, but a school shooting, something like that. You might look at what has happened at other universities or other schools when they went through the same sort of thing, and then you're going to talk about what happened at this school that you're studying, and you might hypothesize what they did and how it worked. Okay? You have an educated guess. One professor told me one time that use a research question when you're just not sure. When you use a hypothesis, you've got a lot more confidence and you're willing to hedge your bets a little bit. Okay? Keep in mind, and this is something critical for young researchers to remember. If your hypothesis turns out to be incorrect, that's okay. That doesn't mean your study has failed. As long as you use the appropriate methodology, as long as you ask the right questions and you set up the study appropriately, if you're wrong, that's okay. You still added to the body of knowledge. Remember, Thomas Edison was famous for having said he didn't fail 999 times in developing the incandescent light bulb. He discovered 999 ways how not to develop the incandescent light bulb. Okay, so keep that in mind. The next thing I want to hit on is your literature review. Some of you have talked about dated literature, and overall, we want to stay within a 5 to 10 year frame. Okay, we want to talk about literature that's been written and talked about this topic between the last 5 and 10 years. But it is perfectly acceptable to use much, much older literature, 50, 60, even 70 years old, if it's the seminal work, if it established the line of research, if it's where this theory was developed, or if it's going to provide us a research instrument that was used, if that's when the research instrument was developed. You need to discuss it. You need to talk about that older research. It also can be used for historical context. So if your topic was discussed and researched 10, 15 years ago, maybe 20 years ago, and not much has changed, you want to find out why it hasn't changed, what has stayed consistent, or if it has changed, what has changed in that process. So it's okay to have some of that older research. This isn't a critique or anything like that, it's just a comment. It's all right to have some older research in there. You don't want to have too much, and you don't want it to be loaded with older research, but it's okay to have some, so don't sweat that. Big one that, quite honestly, I found a little frustrating is the difference between data collection techniques and methodological approaches or methodology. When we're talking about the methodology, we're talking about the 5 approaches we've studied this semester: ethnography, grounded theory, narrative, phenomenological studies, case studies. Those are methods. So when you see somebody asking, so what method did you use? That's what they mean. Interviews, observation, and document analysis. Those are data collection techniques that you're using in your narrative study or your case study. Don't confuse those. That's two very, very different things. You took a qualitative approach using a case study methodology. You did a quantitative approach using an experiment. Your data collection for your case study was document analysis and interviews. Okay? Make sure you're very clear on those things. And then finally, remember in your population. Some of you have made the comment that, well, the population was really small. That's qualitative research. It's likely going to be small. In quantitative research, we're concerned about much larger audiences, much larger populations. And we'll talk about a little bit of that why here in just a minute. In qualitative research, we don't need very large populations. In my book, which took a qualitative approach, as a phenomenological approach, I interviewed 15 people. That's plenty. If I were doing a survey, 15, way too few. I would probably want to interview or want to survey 150 to 250 people. 15 I wouldn't be able to generalize on that. But for a qualitative approach, you don't want much more than that because it becomes too cumbersome and you can't really draw good conclusions off of it. Okay? So hopefully those are some points that will make some of these things more clear. You'll be able to apply these. This week, we are getting into three very important topics: credibility, reliability, and validity when it comes to research. Credibility is going to come from you demonstrating that you've done the research, that you have done some reading, that you've studied the literature. This is why several of you in your introduction, when you were sharing with me what you have observed and what has happened, that's great, but you need some research to back that up, because if you're just talking about what you've observed, at best, people are going to look at it and go, okay, well, yeah, that worked for you, but what about in this situation, or what about with my population? At worst, they're going to look at it and go, oh, you're biased, and so I can't trust any of the research that you're going to be sharing with me because you're coming from your point of view, and I can't trust that you looked at both sides of the argument, okay? So that's why we want to go in and have a little bit of research to back up our claims, to back up our point of view. Validity is, in short, demonstrating that you picked the right methodology to study this. So, for example, I wrote a couple of examples here. You're not going to use a grounded theory if you want to examine how the University of Central Missouri dealt with the budget cuts that came from the state in 2018. That would not be a grounded theory study. That would be a case study. If you use a grounded theory, you don't have a lot of validity to your study because that methodology is not going to yield the results or yield the answers that you're looking for. A case study would do that. You're not going to perform a narrative study if you want to discover the culture of a broadcast crew during the production of the Olympics. That would be more of an ethnographic study because you're wanting to study their culture. You want to get indoctrinated and learn about what it's like from the inside. Okay, and a narrative isn't going to do that. A narrative would be the story of the producer and how she got into the profession and how she grew to this point of being able to produce such a large event as the Olympics, and what challenges she's faced and how she overcame them. All right? So that's where your validity comes from. The way a professor pointed it out to me one time is you don't use a yardstick to measure somebody's IQ. That's not a valid instrument. So that's what we're focusing on here. Reliability deals more with generalizability and being able to replicate the study, be able to use that instrument and use those results and then apply them in a different situation and get similar results. We don't worry about reliability too much in qualitative research because, number one, we're using much smaller populations. You can't really generalize to a larger population based on this smaller one. You might be able to if you do the study again. So, like, for instance, the book that I did with my 15 sports broadcasters, if I went into Kansas and interviewed 15 there, I might find out the same things. If I take it down into Arkansas, might find out some similar results there. Might not. That's not the point. When you're doing a quantitative study, that is a driving factor. You do want to be able to generalize it to a larger population. That's why your population needs to be bigger. It needs to be more random. You need to make sure you have as generalizable a population as you can. In qualitative research, that's not really one of our foci. So keep that in mind. Okay? So this week, you have one assignment. It's your final discussion. It's your discussion board post number 4. What will you do? Okay, so that is your one assignment this week. Watch the video and read chapter 10 as it relates to credibility, validity, and reliability. and then do discussion board post number 4, what will you do? And then the next couple of weeks are work weeks to work on your final project, so there's going to be no video to watch, there's going to be no readings to do, you're just working on that final project. Speaking of your final projects, if you have questions, I'll be grading your research questions this week, but if you have questions on your introduction, or I make some comments on your research questions or those types of things, now's the time to ask. Let's get those things cleared up. That's the idea of the mini projects, is working on the process so that the end product is spot on. Alrighty? Okay. Have a great week. See you later.